It was a sweltering afternoon in 306 BCE when Epicurus and his friends gathered under the shade of olive trees in a small garden just outside the bustling city of Athens. The streets were alive with merchants, philosophers, and laborers, each pursuing their own vision of success. But here in the quiet refuge of this garden, a group of like-minded souls sought something different, not wealth, fame, or power, but peace. Epicurus, a man of modest build and gentle demeanor, had purchased this plot of land not as a retreat from life but as an experiment in how to live it well. This garden would become the birthplace of a philosophy that challenged the very foundations of what it meant to be happy. Epicurus believed happiness wasn't a reward waiting to be claimed by the ambitious or the lucky. It was available to anyone willing to understand its true nature. But what made this vision so revolutionary wasn't the idea of happiness itself. It was how he defined it. For centuries, Greek culture had been steeped in the grandeur of heroism and the pursuit of glory. To be great, one had to be remembered, celebrated, and larger than life. Epicurus turned that notion on its head. Happiness, he argued, wasn't found in the grand or the extraordinary, but in the simple and the serene. His life and teachings became a living testament to this idea, and his garden was both a literal and metaphorical representation of his philosophy. In that garden, there were no hierarchies, no lofty thrones for the wise and benches for the ignorant. Everyone sat together, sharing food, laughter, and conversation. Epicurus insisted that friendship was one of the pillars of a happy life. Unlike the transactional relationships of the political sphere, where alliances could be shattered by ambition or betrayal, the friendships cultivated in his garden were based on trust and mutual care. He called these bonds the greatest source of security in life, far more reliable than the fragile protection offered by wealth or armies. Sitting with his friends, enjoying a modest meal of bread, olives, and wine, Epicurus felt richer than the kings who dined on gold-plated banquets. But what was most striking about Epicurus wasn't just his appreciation for simplicity, it was his understanding of human nature. He believed that much of our suffering comes from misunderstanding our desires. We crave things, not because we truly need them, but because we've been taught to want them. Society whispers that success means acquiring more possessions, more status, more recognition. But Epicurus saw through this illusion. He classified desires into three categories: natural and necessary, natural but unnecessary, and unnatural. Food, shelter, and friendship were natural and necessary. These were the things we genuinely needed to live well. Luxuries like fine clothing or extravagant feasts were natural but unnecessary. They could bring pleasure, but they weren't essential. The third category, unnatural desires like fame or limitless wealth, was where the real trouble lay. These were insatiable, a bottomless pit of wanting that could never be filled. Epicurus wasn't against pleasure, far from it. In fact, he considered pleasure the highest good. But his version of pleasure wasn't the indulgent hedonism we often associate with the word today. It wasn't about chasing fleeting highs or drowning in excess. It was about achieving a state of tranquility, what he called ataraxia. This was a life free from anxiety, pain, and unnecessary desire. Imagine a still pond, undisturbed by wind or storms. That, to Epicurus, was the ultimate pleasure. Not the fireworks of euphoria, but the calm of contentment. What made Epicurus so compelling wasn't just his ideas, but how deeply they resonated with the struggles of his time. The Hellenistic world was one of uncertainty and upheaval. Empires rose and fell, fortunes were won and lost, and the gods seemed indifferent to human suffering. In a world like this, the promise of tranquility was nothing short of revolutionary, and unlike other philosophers who spoke in abstract riddles or retreated into intellectual elitism, Epicurus made his teachings accessible. His garden was open to women, slaves, and anyone else willing to engage in the pursuit of wisdom. In an era where philosophy often mirrored the rigid structures of society, Epicurus created a space where ideas could flow freely, unburdened by status or privilege. One of the most misunderstood aspects of Epicurean philosophy is its relationship with death. Epicurus famously declared, "Death is nothing to us. At first glance, this might seem callous or dismissive, but it was in fact an invitation to liberation. He argued that fear of death was one of the greatest sources of human anxiety, yet it was entirely irrational. When we exist, death is not. When death exists, we are not. Therefore, there is no point in fearing something that we will never experience. By embracing this perspective, Epicurus freed his followers from one of life's most paralyzing fears, allowing them to focus on the present moment. In many ways, the garden was a microcosm of Epicurean thought, a world stripped down to its essentials, where life could be lived with clarity and purpose. Yet his philosophy wasn't without its critics. The Stoics, for example, accused Epicureans of being overly focused on pleasure and insufficiently concerned with virtue. But Epicurus would have shrugged off such criticisms. He wasn't interested in abstract debates over virtue for virtue's sake. To him, the measure of a philosophy was its ability to improve the lives of those who practiced it. If his garden offered peace to the weary and joy to the disheartened, what more proof was needed? What's remarkable is how timeless Epicurus's ideas feel, even in our world of smartphones, skyscrapers, and 24/7 news cycles. We may no longer gather in sunlit gardens, but the challenges Epicurus addressed are as relevant as ever. The constant hum of societal expectations, the unrelenting pursuit of more, the fear of death, and the neglect of genuine connection. These are the struggles of modern life as much as they were of ancient Athens. Perhaps the greatest gift Epicurus offers us is the reminder that happiness isn't something we need to chase. It's something we can cultivate right here with the people we care about, the food on our table, and the quiet moments we allow ourselves to savor. It's easy to dismiss Epicurus as naive, to say that life is far too complicated for such simple solutions. But that, in itself, is a testament to how deeply we've bought into the idea that happiness must be difficult, that it must be earned through struggle or sacrifice. Epicurus dared to imagine otherwise. His garden wasn't just a physical space, it was a radical act of defiance against the complexity of the world. It was a statement that happiness doesn't have to be complicated, that maybe, just maybe, the good life is simpler than we think. And isn't that a thought worth sitting with?